The Emperor's voice boomed across the stars as 10 billion screens lit up with his sneer. Let Earth send its mightiest. We'll try not to laugh too hard when he dies. The crowd roared. Galaxies watched. But somewhere in a forgotten training bunker buried beneath the Rockies, a man watching the broadcast didn't flinch. He leaned forward, exhaled once, and whispered, Fine. I'll come. But I'm not bringing mercy. No one knew his name. Not really. The governments did, buried in files locked behind more firewalls than nuclear launch codes, but to the world, he was just a silhouette in rumors. They said he once walked out of a black site with 3 bullets in his chest and a grin. They said he trained alone in sub-zero caves because the cold calmed him. They said he turned down medals like they were coupons. When Earth's diplomats saw the broadcast of the Emperor's challenge, they hadn't even planned to respond. It was a mockery, a show trial with blood. But before anyone knew it, a transport ship was activated, flight code stolen, and a single occupant loaded into the bay. He didn't wait for permission. He gave himself orders. The ship tore through FTL space toward Vorex 9, the galaxy's oldest and cruelest gladiatorial moon. Inside the quiet steel hold, he sat with his legs crossed, a dented flask at his side, eyes closed, heartbeat low. Around him, elite security marines avoided eye contact. One leaned over to his partner and whispered, You ever see someone volunteer for the blood arena? The other just shook his head. Not who sleeps like that. Meanwhile, on Vorex 9, preparations erupted like a festival of violence. Banners of flesh and metal were hoisted above stadium gates. Blood vendors sold vials from past champions, some real, most fabricated. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor and his warlords drank venom wine and laughed, playing betting games on how long Earth's champion would last. 2 minutes, 1 minute 30 seconds. The record for shortest match in the Blood Arena's history was 11 seconds. The Emperor said Earth would beat that. Then the ship landed. The crowd expected fireworks. Grand armor. Maybe a genetically enhanced beastman. What stepped out was a man in old combat boots, worn cargo pants, and a faded thermal shirt. No helmet. No blade. Just a weathered leather strap across his chest holding a steel tag, the kind soldiers wore centuries ago. He blinked against the twin suns, rolled his shoulders, and said, Nice weather for war. The reporters froze. Was that supposed to be a joke? In the upper levels, the Emperor raised an eyebrow. This is what they sent? The Empress chuckled. At least it will be short. Before his first match, the man was given a chance to select his weapon from the armory. He walked through racks of plasma blades, gravity whips, chain axes, and mine shredders. He touched none of them. Instead, he reached behind the counter, pulled out a 6-inch carbon fiber rope and muttered, This'll do. The quartermaster, a 4-armed gladiator vet missing half a jaw, stared and whispered, You'll die with that. The man looked back and replied, No, he will. The blood arena itself was a monster. A floating pit with shifting terrain, molten panels, blade traps, and live explosives embedded for entertainment. Around it, 3 million spectators filled the seats. Above, orbital satellites broadcast in every language. Billions tuned in to witness Earth's humiliation. His first opponent was a legend, Krolix the Carver, a 10-foot beast with acid sacs, triple-jointed limbs, and talons known to puncture cruiser hulls. Krolix had eaten more enemies than he'd fought. As the gates opened and Krolix screamed his war cry, the man didn't charge. He walked. Calm. Unbothered. Krolix roared louder, saliva hitting the dirt. Still the man walked. Then, with no warning, he ducked the first swipe, rolled under a tail lash, sprang up, and in 2 movements, looped the carbon rope around Krolix's throat and yanked. What followed was a symphony of horror. Krolix thrashed, stumbled, acid foaming at the edges of his lips. The rope tightened. The human climbed his back, driving knees into joints, twisting the beast's balance. Finally, Krolix's eyes rolled, and he crashed face first into the dirt. No blood. Just stillness. 3 seconds passed. Then the announcer, stunned, whispered, Earth wins, in 22 seconds. Silence reigned. Then the crowd erupted, not with cheers, but with confusion. Some booed. Some laughed. Some stared in disbelief. In the commentary booth, one analyst murmured, "That shouldn't have been possible. Krolix, he's a Tier 6 nightmare class." The lead commentator, a cyber-enhanced mantid, shook his head. "Earth's fighter is something else." In the Emperor's booth, glasses stopped mid-air. "Find out everything about him," the Emperor barked. "Name. Tech enhancements. Trainers. I want files." His advisors scrambled. They dug. And the deeper they went, the colder they became. No official record. No unit number. No medical history. Only whispers. The last known mention was an off-the-record file marked simply, "Merciless." No known surname. Just a note. "Do not deploy. Use only in final contingency." Back in the arena barracks, while medics cleaned up Krolix's unconscious body, the man sat alone in the corner, rewrapping his rope like it was a sacred relic. Another fighter, a cybernetic centaur from the Syrinx Corps, approached and grinned. "You don't talk much." The man didn't look up. "Talking won't stop the bleeding." The centaur laughed. "You're insane." The man finally glanced up, just enough to say, "Only if I lose." And just like that, the galaxy's opinion began to shift. Earth's humiliation had turned into curiosity. Then curiosity became fear. Who was this man? Why didn't he use weapons? Why did he look like he didn't care about the crowd, the rules, or the fame? It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't showmanship. It was something worse. He didn't care about winning. He just wanted them to know what it felt like to lose. The second round was scheduled just 12 hours after the first. Most champions rested for days between matches, nursing injuries and recalibrating implants. But the human didn't request anything. No food, no gear adjustments, not even a massage like the pampered elites from other systems. He simply returned to his small assigned space, sat on the floor with his back to the wall, and closed his eyes like he was back in a foxhole waiting for the next wave. Monitors outside showed him breathing slow, steady, like a machine built for storms. The staff debated whether to offer him medical support. The arena manager shook his head and said, "Let him be. If he wants to walk into death unprepared, let him. Saves us paperwork." His opponent this time was something different. No muscle beast or creature of instinct. This one had brains. A psychic tactician named Threxel, bred in a lab by the Saran Syndicate. Threxel had ended 12 champions without lifting a blade. He preferred to crush their minds from within, forcing madness, hallucinations, and finally, submission. His victories were silent, clinical, terrifying. The audience didn't cheer during his matches. They held their breath. The only sounds were the screams of the broken. When they announced the next round, some viewers predicted the human wouldn't make it past the first minute. Others suspected he'd been genetically tampered with. But no one could explain why his vital signs looked so average. No augmentation spikes, no hormone surges. Just calm. Too calm. The arena floor this time was smaller, with angular platforms rising and falling randomly, designed to disrupt movement. Threxel floated in on a gravity disk, his black neural threads trailing behind him like hair made of smoke. His eyes pulsed with violet energy. He didn't speak as he descended. He never did. He just entered minds and whispered things that broke men. Across from him, the human stepped out barefoot again. He'd taken off his shirt this time, showing the scarred road map that was his torso. Burns, blade cuts, and what looked like a skin graft from some alien source. He walked to the center of the arena like he was stepping into a familiar bar fight. When the signal blared, Threxel struck first. His mental tendrils lashed out invisibly, curling into the human's mind, searching for the usual anchors: childhood, trauma, regret, guilt. But the moment he entered, something slammed shut. Not a wall, not a void, but a presence. Heavy. Ancient. And smiling. Threxel flinched. For the first time in recorded memory, he recoiled. The audience watched, unsure of what they were seeing. Nothing was happening on the surface. The two stood there, frozen. But in the psychic plane, it was a battlefield. Threxel tried again, pushing deeper. He conjured illusions, flames, the sound of screaming children, the cracking of bones. But instead of collapsing, the human laughed. Not loudly. Just a small exhale through his nose. Like a man watching a bad movie. Then he spoke, not out loud, but through the link. "You're not the first to go digging in there. You won't be the last to get lost." Threxel's vision warped. He was now in a jungle. Earth's old wars, maybe? The sound of rotor blades above. Gunfire in the distance. And then he saw himself, not the real Threxel, but a younger, terrified version, trapped, running, chased by something unseen. That's when the voices started. Familiar voices, calling him by name, asking why he'd left them behind. The hallucination wasn't the human's doing. It was Threxel's own fear, reflected back. The human wasn't projecting. He was mirroring. And the mirror showed exactly what Threxel didn't want to see. Outside, Threxel's body shook. His hands trembled. Spectators began to murmur. The Emperor leaned forward, lips tightening. In the ring, the human finally moved. A single step forward. That broke the spell. Threxel screamed and lashed out psychically with everything he had. The sky flickered, the platform shook, even the sensors glitched from the overload. But the human didn't stop. He took 2 more steps. Then another. And when he was within striking distance, he simply touched Threxel's shoulder and said, "You don't belong here. Go home." Threxel dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Not dead. But his eyes were wide open and unfocused, twitching. He'd never fight again. The arena announcers didn't know what to say. One of them stammered. "Earth's fighter appears to have neutralized Threxel without physical contact?" Another added, "We may be witnessing the most unorthodox victory in the history of the tournament." The crowd erupted, not in cheers but in fevered speculation. What was Earth hiding? Who was this man? Theories flooded the networks. A lost god, a war ghost, a synthetic, a time traveler. All wrong, of course. He wasn't any of those. He was just trained differently. Trained the way Earth had to train when you were always outnumbered, always behind in tech, and never given a second chance. Backstage, alien analysts tried to intercept him for questioning. He ignored them. Walked right past. When one asked what kind of soldier he was, he replied without stopping, "The kind that doesn't like being studied." The medics ran to stabilize Threxel. His vitals were stable, but his brain activity was spiking in strange patterns. The neural technician scanned his mind and frowned. "It's like someone walked through his soul wearing boots," he muttered. In the Emperor's palace, the War Council was called in for an emergency meeting. The head of Biowar operations insisted the human had hidden psychic abilities. The High Inquisitor suggested exorcism. The Emperor silenced them all. "He's a threat," he said coldly. "But not to be removed. Not yet. He's entertaining. And fear sharpens the blade." He ordered surveillance drones to shadow the human. Track him. Analyze him. Learn his weaknesses. But the reports kept coming back empty. No patterns. No fear responses. And every time a probe got close, it stopped transmitting. One even detonated. The cause listed in the report was simply, "Return signal corrupted." Back in the barracks, the human sat with his back against the same wall. This time, he held a small object in his hand. A metal pendant, old, scratched. On the back, a single name. He stared at it for a long time, then tucked it away and whispered, "Two down." He didn't smile. Didn't celebrate. Just closed his eyes again and waited for the next gate to open. Around the galaxy, millions of viewers watched replays of the match and said the same thing. He didn't fight like a warrior. He fought like someone who didn't care about surviving. That terrified them. Because it meant he didn't fear death. And no empire, no matter how powerful, wants to meet a man who's already made peace with dying. The barracks were unusually quiet that night. Most of the surviving fighters either trained obsessively, drank until they passed out, or talked big to cover their nerves. But after what happened to Threxel, the psychic killer, even the cockiest ones kept their voices down. Everyone had seen the match. No punches. No cuts. No blood. Just a man walking forward, calm as a priest, and turning one of the galaxy's most feared minds into a shaking mess. The silence that followed was heavier than any roar of victory. And it carried through the stone and steel halls of the arena complex like a ghost no one wanted to talk about. He had no title. No war cry. No anthem. Just presence. That was the worst part. He didn't even seem angry. Just focused, like this was all inevitable. She found him alone again. The War Queen from the Talanax Empire. A fierce creature with golden skin that shimmered like heatwave glass and a spine laced with embedded crystals. She'd fought in 7 war sectors, commanded orbital strikes, and personally executed an emperor once. But even she approached him cautiously. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, running his fingers across a strip of cloth. Old. Frayed. Looked like it had been torn from a uniform. She leaned against the wall near him and said, "They're terrified of you, you know." He didn't respond. She smirked and added, "I like it." He opened one eye, studied her for half a second, then looked back down at the cloth. She slid to the ground beside him and crossed her legs. "You're facing Bragan next," she said. "They call him the Core Breaker. Punched a crater into a moon once, or so the legends go." The man looked up slightly. "Legends exaggerate." She shrugged. "Maybe. But I watched him snap a mercenary's spine with a single elbow. That wasn't exaggeration. That was clean-up work." He nodded like she just reminded him to tie his boots. Then he offered her half a ration bar he had tucked in his sleeve. She stared at it, laughed once, and took it. "You're weird," she said through a grin. "I've known assassins, zealots, monsters. But you're like a storm pretending to be a man." Then the alarms blared. Not the usual match call. Not the ceremonial horns. This was sharp. Sudden. Emergency. Red lights pulsed down the corridor. Fighters spilled into the halls, weapons drawn. The Queen rose immediately, hand on the blade fused to her thigh. The man stood slower, calmly brushing dust from his knees. A guard stormed into the hallway and shouted, "All champions, back to quarters now!" But before he could explain, an explosion rocked the far end of the building. Smoke poured in, followed by screeches not made for open air. Assassins. Not fighters. Not sanctioned combatants. Someone had broken the rules. The Empire had sent killers to eliminate the human before he got any further. They thought he'd be vulnerable off the field. They didn't know that for some soldiers, the arena was actually the safest place to face them. The assassins wore cloaks woven from phase thread and moved like shadows over water. 3 of them appeared in the hallway, blades gleaming, and rushed forward. The Talanax Queen reached for her sword, but the man was already moving. He didn't pull a weapon. He used the hallway itself. He grabbed a loose beam from the wall, pivoted, and drove it into the first assassin's ribs with such speed the impact echoed like a gunshot. The second attacker lunged with a vibrating blade meant to pierce through armor. The man ducked under it, grabbed the assassin's wrist, twisted, and used his own momentum to slam him headfirst into the wall. The third hesitated. That was the mistake. The man closed the gap in 2 steps, kicked the back of the knee, and drove an elbow down onto the spine. 3 seconds. 3 down. The Queen stood stunned, sword still half drawn. She looked around at the unconscious bodies, eyes wide. "They weren't rookies," she whispered. "That was a royal team. They've taken out warlords before." The man didn't answer. He turned and walked toward the smoke-filled corridor from where the assassins had come. "Where are you going?" she called. He didn't slow. "To find out if there are more." The guards tried to stop him, but the moment they raised their rifles, the sensors on their wrists beeped warnings. His presence was flagged now. Red level. No one touched him. Not without clearance. He found 2 more assassins in the supply bay, preparing to poison the water filters. They didn't even see him coming. When it was over, he stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, staring at the floor. His hands were scratched, his shirt torn. He looked less like a hero and more like a survivor. A man who'd fought in too many rooms like this. Rooms with broken bodies and silent corners. Then, quietly, he said, "They're desperate." "That's good." A drone recorded everything. The footage went viral before the blood even dried. Billions saw the Empire's attempt to cheat. Billions saw it fail. The next day, Earth issued a statement, not from a government official, but from a private military contractor who claimed to know him. "He didn't go to represent Earth," the spokesperson said. "He went because one of the combatants in the arena once attacked a humanitarian convoy in Sector 9A. His convoy. He wasn't sent. He volunteered." The galaxy now realized the game had changed. This wasn't entertainment for him. This was a mission. And he wasn't fighting to survive. He was crossing names off a list. The Emperor, red with fury, shouted in the royal chamber, "I want him dead before the final round." But even his own council looked uneasy now. The man had become a symbol. Assassination attempts had failed. His fights drew more viewership than any event in arena history. Sponsors demanded he be allowed to continue. The people were fascinated. Fear and respect had begun to twist into admiration. Every attempt to control him only made him more powerful in the eyes of the public. That night, back in his corner of the barracks, the Talanax Queen visited him again. She didn't bring questions this time. Just silence. She sat beside him, handed him a clean bandage, and said, "They'll send worse next time." He nodded, wrapping his hand. She looked at him, then finally asked, "Why don't you ever smile?" He paused, then answered, "Because every time I did, someone died." She didn't laugh. This time, she understood. In the flickering light, he tucked the strip of cloth back into his pocket, stood, and said, "Tomorrow, they send the core breaker." She tilted her head. "And?" He looked back once before disappearing into the shadows. "Then I break the core." The crowd was louder than ever. The Blood Arena, already infamous for its brutality, had become the center of galactic attention, not because of its spectacle, but because of the anomaly that refused to play by the rules. Earth's champion wasn't supposed to survive the first round. He wasn't supposed to humiliate Threxel. He definitely wasn't supposed to dismantle a royal assassin team with improvised weapons. And yet, there he was, walking barefoot across the arena's sand once again, every camera locked on him, every commentator scrambling to explain what made him unstoppable. He didn't posture. He didn't wave to the crowd. He just walked with that same unshakable rhythm, like he'd already lived this moment, and was just following a script only he could read. Today's opponent was Bragan. A juggernaut bred and built in the gravity forges of the core worlds. 9 feet tall. Engineered spine. Double-layer bone density. His fists had been surgically reinforced with plasma-cooled impact plates that could punch holes through drop ships. He entered the arena with a roar that cracked stone, dragging a hammer so massive it left gouges in the steel floor. The announcers tried to sell it as a massacre waiting to happen. One of them screamed over the noise that Earth's champion had met his match. But even they didn't sound confident anymore. The Empire wanted blood. It wanted revenge. It wanted a show. But the man who walked into that arena didn't care about any of that. He came for a different reason. Bragan charged immediately. No monologue. No warning. Just raw power exploding forward. The hammer came down like a meteor, and the sand erupted under the force. But the human was already moving. He didn't dodge far. Just enough. One step to the side. He slid low, using Bragan's momentum to duck under the next swing, and struck the side of the giant's knee with an open palm. It looked like nothing. But Bragan staggered, just for a second, confused. Then he roared again, this time with fury. The dance continued. Bragan swung, screamed, stomped, and the human kept circling, tapping, testing. He moved like he was listening to something no one else could hear. A rhythm. A flaw. A pattern in Bragan's rage. He didn't try to match strength with strength. He waited for precision to matter. Bragan lifted the hammer for a final overhead smash, and that's when it happened. The human didn't dodge. He stepped in. Close. Too close. And as the hammer came down, he pivoted, grabbed Bragan's wrist, redirected the weight, and slammed the giant's own hand into the ground, using the momentum to drive the hammer into Bragan's knee instead. The sound was sickening. Metal crunch. Bone snap. Bragan dropped to one side, bellowing in pain. The human climbed up his back like he'd done it 100 times, locked an arm under Bragan's chin, and twisted, not to kill, but to choke. Cut the blood. Cut the breath. Bragan flailed, panicked, slammed fists into the floor. The human held on like a ghost riding a storm. Then finally, the giant collapsed. Not dead, but unconscious. Finished. The crowd went silent again. Then, the Emperor's voice cut through the arena like a blade. Finish him. The command wasn't a request. It was law. All matches were to end in death unless the Emperor himself chose mercy. But Earth's champion did not move. He stood, looked up at the Imperial booth, and said one word. No. The silence turned into static. The entire arena tensed. The Emperor rose from his seat, his face dark with fury. No one denied an execution order in the blood arena. No one ever had. But the human just turned his back, walked away from the downed Bragan, and exited the floor like he had somewhere more important to be. Security didn't try to stop him. Not yet. Not after what happened to the last team. He returned to his quarters, rinsed the blood from his hands, and sat down with the pendant again. It was older now, chipped from age and maybe a little heat damage. He stared at it like it still had something to say. Then someone knocked on his door. He didn't answer. The door opened anyway. The one person in the arena with enough arrogance to ignore protocol. The Emperor's nephew. High Commander Sorrel. A pompous strategist known more for his wardrobe than his battlefield experience. He stepped inside flanked by 2 honor guards and said, "You just embarrassed the Empire in front of half the galaxy." That wasn't a suggestion. You will explain yourself. The human looked up slowly. I already did, he said. Sorrel sneered. You think we can't end you? You think you're untouchable because the crowd likes a sideshow? The human stood. 1 inch at a time. Like a rising wave. I think you don't understand what you invited, he said. You thought you asked for a warrior? But what you got was the consequence of your past. Sorrel laughed and gestured to the guards. Remove him. Now. They moved forward. And then they stopped. Because behind the human, the wall had cracked. Not from impact. From heat. The pendant in his hand was glowing. Just for a second. Enough to trigger every scanner in the room. Enough to ping a code lost in military blacklists. The guards backed off. Sorrel's face twitched. What is that? What did you bring into my arena? The human stepped forward, pocketed the pendant, and said, the reminder of who you forgot. Sorrel left, furious, shouting that the next match would be his last. That this time, there would be no escape, no tricks, no delay. The Empire would bury him beneath the sand. But behind closed doors, the War Council was fracturing. Some wanted to ban him. Others wanted to recruit him. The Emperor said neither. He ordered one last match. A final challenge to end the tournament. The greatest beast ever grown in the Empire's biological vaults. A predator so ancient it was said to be the prototype for war. The Death Maw. A creature too dangerous to use in war, too violent to clone. It had killed everything they had ever tested against it. They would unleash it in the arena with one goal. Tear Earth's champion to pieces. No weapons. No rules. No delays. Just teeth, rage, and the final proof that Earth could still be broken. But as the moon spun slowly toward the final match, and the audience began to line up in the billions, the champion was already preparing. not by sharpening blades or adjusting gear, but by sitting still, quietly, eyes closed, breathing like a man who had already seen what death looked like, and decided he had something more dangerous to offer in return. The final arena had no floor, no walls, no barriers. It floated in the void just above the moon's surface, surrounded by shielded stands and 1,000 orbiting drones broadcasting the event live to every known system. There were no traps, no terrain tricks, no exits. Just a flat circular platform wide enough for a small city, built for one reason only: death without escape. The Emperor sat high in the observation deck, his robe laced with silver chains, face carved with fury and anticipation. This wasn't just a match anymore. It was a declaration. The Empire would not be mocked. The human was no longer a novelty. He had become a threat. Today, that would end. They brought the death maw in chains that glowed white-hot. The beast was a product of forbidden science, a horror dredged up from genetic memory and reassembled over centuries. It stood on 6 legs, each like a siege cannon, its body covered in plates of reactive bone armor, and its mouth lined with 3 rows of serrated, regenerating fangs. Its scream could crack metal. Its breath alone had killed 6 handlers. It wasn't just a creature. It was the answer to any question the galaxy dared ask. They released it at the center of the arena with a blast of heat and steam. The crowd fell silent. Then Earth's champion stepped out. No armor. No weapons. Just a man in worn combat pants, feet bare, hands empty, chest still streaked with bruises from the Bragan fight. He walked to the edge of the platform, looked across the gap, and nodded once. No fear. No fanfare. Just a presence. The announcers whispered now. Even they couldn't shout. Not here. Not now. The music had stopped. The violence had gone quiet. This wasn't sport anymore. This was judgment. The gates locked. The field sealed. The match began. The death maw didn't wait. It charged forward, claws slicing deep trenches into the steel as it moved. Every step shook the platform. Its roar hit like a sonic blast. The human ran. Not away. Forward. He didn't try to dodge wide. He moved like a bullet, sliding under the first set of claws, hands grabbing the inner elbow of the front leg and twisting it just enough to throw the beast off balance. It stumbled. Not by much. But enough. The human rolled across the ground, sprang up, and vaulted onto the creature's back. The beast thrashed wildly, spinning and slamming its body into the floor, trying to shake him off. But he stayed on, crawling along its back like he was climbing a moving mountain, searching for something, anything, a weakness. He jabbed fingers between plates, struck pressure points behind its ears, and used the heel of his palm to crack a hidden joint near the jawline. The death maw howled, spun, and flung itself into a pillar of force at the arena's edge. Both of them went airborne for a second before crashing down hard. The impact sent a ripple through the platform, and pieces of the edge began to crumble. He didn't rise immediately. Blood dripped from his forehead. One arm hung lower than it should. The beast stood first. It limped slightly, one leg dragging now, one eye swollen shut from a previous strike. But it was still lethal. It lunged again. This time, the human didn't try to dodge. He turned sideways and let the claws hit the ground beside him. As the death maw reared back for another strike, he jumped and drove his full weight into the exposed nerve cluster just under the shoulder plate. The beast shrieked. Its entire right side spasmed. It staggered backward. For the first time in its engineered life, it hesitated. The Emperor stood, leaning forward, his knuckles white on the railing. The crowd began to stir again. Something was shifting. The human, battered, bleeding, nearly broken, stood slowly. His legs shook. His arm clearly dislocated. But his eyes hadn't changed. Still calm. Still clear. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the pendant. He kissed it once, then dropped it onto the arena floor. The crowd watched, confused. Then he spoke. Only once. For her. Then he charged. The final exchange happened faster than anyone could explain. The beast struck first, but the human slipped under it, sliding in close, using his injured arm to bait a strike, spinning behind it at the last second, and climbing its side again. He found the weak point he'd opened earlier behind the jaw, wrapped his legs around the neck, and with one final cry drove his fingers into the soft point behind the skull base, deep into the nerve bundle. The death maw let out a noise no one had ever heard before. Not a roar. Not a scream. Something like a gasp. Then it collapsed. The crowd didn't cheer. Not right away. No one knew what to do. The human stood over the beast's motionless form, chest heaving, blood running down his side. He looked up at the Emperor's box, stared for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Slowly. No celebration. No victory pose. Just a man leaving a grave. The next day, the Empire's media tried to spin it. They called it luck. They said the death maw had a defect. But the people had seen it. The galaxy had watched. Every corner of space now had one new unspoken rule. Do not provoke Earth. Not unless you're ready to meet the one they send when they stop asking nicely. Treaties came next. Silent ones. Border patrols backed off Earth's claimed sectors. Research agreements suddenly appeared in the diplomatic inboxes. Trade tariffs evaporated without explanation. Earth didn't brag. It didn't issue threats. It didn't need to. The message had been delivered in flesh and silence. The man who carried that message boarded his ship without a word. No fanfare. No escort. Just one seat. One mission completed. She waited at the docking bay. The War Queen. She didn't speak until he passed her. Then she asked, "You could have ruled. You could have become a legend." He paused. "I didn't come here for power. I came here for peace." She stepped closer. "Did you find it?" He looked out at the stars and said, "Not yet. But it's quieter now." She didn't try to stop him. She just watched him leave, then turned to the stars herself and whispered, "If that was Earth's champion, I hope we never meet their wrath." The freighter lifted into orbit and vanished into the folds of space. Inside, the man finally allowed himself to sleep. Not deeply. Not safely. But enough. The pendant rested on the table beside him. Still scratched. Still silent. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. Somewhere out there, another empire would rise. Another threat would come. But for now, he had done what he came to do. He didn't bring mercy. He brought memory. And the galaxy would never forget it.